Thank you.
All right, we're starting. Hello, welcome. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hola, bienvenidos, bienvenidos a todos que nos están acompañando. Bienvenidos, welcome. Vamos a comenzar. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us on this webinar titled Leading Arizona into a Brighter Future. Gracias de nuevo por acompañarnos en este seminario web, llevando a Arizona hacia un futuro más brillante. Solo les quería comentar que vamos a tener interpretación en español. We will have Spanish interpretation, and we will have Denise, our interpreter, give the instructions for that. And then we'll have Diana commence our webinar. Thank you, Denise. Go ahead.
Thank you. To access language interpretation to Spanish, you will click on the globe icon that will appear after these instructions. It'll say interpretation at the bottom of your screen. It may be available under the More icon with a circle and the 3 dots. You may then select Spanish. If you're on your phone or tablet, you will tap the screen to activate the buttons at the bottom of the screen. Select the circle with the 3 dots, then select interpretation and your language. Please remember to speak slowly and clearly in the language you have selected. Buenos días, tenemos interpretación al español disponible. Para acceder a la interpretación, seleccionará el icono de globo que aparecerá al fondo de la pantalla después de estas instrucciones. Puede que lo encuentre al pulsar el icono con el círculo y los 3 puntos. De la lista que saldrá, seleccionará español. Si está en su teléfono o tableta, tocará la pantalla para activar los botones al fondo de la misma. Seleccionará los 3 puntos, luego seleccionará interpretación y después español. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Diana Dominguez. I'm an advocacy support specialist for Abriendo Puertas, joining you from the borderlands of El Paso, Texas. Thank you for joining Leading Arizona into a Brighter Future, hosted by Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors, and Unidos US. Arizona is home to one of the nation's fastest growing Latino populations, over 2.3 million strong, with nearly 1 in 5 Latino Arizonans under the age of 10. This makes the state an incredible window into the future of Latino families nationwide. Today's conversation builds on insights from the 2025 National Latino Family Report, which highlights the top priorities of Arizona families: economic opportunity, affordable housing, childcare access, and family well-being. Together with our panelists, we'll explore what these findings mean for policy, advocacy, and community leadership. Today, we're joined by panelists who bring both data and on-the-ground expertise. Our first panelist being Javier Martinez. He's the Managing Director of National Policy for Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors. Enrique Davis Mazlum, PhD. He's the Arizona State Director for Unidos US. Kelly Murphy, the Director of Advocacy and Early Childhood Policy, joining us from ASECA. And so let's begin with Javier.
Javier, I can't hear him. I don't know if it's...
Yes, Javier, we cannot hear you. Oh, got it. Yes, Javier, can you update your language? You're on the Spanish channel. Oh,
Technology. Right? Probably logging out and logging back in.
While we get that figured out, do you mind kicking us off, Enrique?
Sure, no problem. Let me just... So first of all, thank you everyone for joining us for Unidos US, Arizona is one of the priority states, right? And I want to thank Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors, and also ASECA for being part of this webinar. Uh, I think there are several important things that we want to talk about and that we want people to actually understand and what are our priorities for Unidos. And a lot of it has to do with economic growth, right? Uh, the economic well-being is one of the key priorities, and this ties in really like to the bone, basically, with early childhood education, because a lot of families in Arizona are not able to afford childcare on their own with the salaries that they're making. So when a family is thinking of their kids, of giving them a better education, of making sure they get a head start and then go to elementary and then junior high, high school, college, it all starts with early childhood education. So, one of the things that are priorities for us is the economic well being for families in Arizona, especially Latinos. So we are working on several issues. Some of them have to do with housing. We have our home initiative that we're working several programs in Arizona. And this is once Latino families or families in general in Arizona, if they are able to put a roof over their heads, if they are able to afford a house, if they are living, that is one less economic strain that they have, right? That they know where they're going to live. And then they start thinking of everything else. It's like a domino effect, but in a positive way. So when we did our different polling and we did one with Abriendo Puertas, opening doors, the majority of people in Arizona talk about improving wages and income, and that's 34%. But the other 34% also is addressing the rising cost of living. So these are the two priorities that Arizona families have. They're thinking of the cost of living, but they're also thinking of the home. Are they able to pay their mortgage? Are they able to pay their rent? So these are the things that they are thinking about. Is it affordable housing? But then we start going into things that have to do with healthcare. All of these issues affect people's pockets. And that's the thing that we have to understand. In Arizona, we have kids that rely on SNAP, WIC, Medicaid, Medicare for families that are Latinos. And we know that right now, with the decisions that are being made at a federal level, families in Arizona are going to be impacted, right? And this is going to have a strain on families, but it's going to have a strain on kids that are going to school. Are they going to receive food while they're going to school, their breakfast, their lunch? In Spanish, we say panza llena, corazón contento, right? If a kid is not filled, if their first necessity, which is eating, is not met, they're not going to concentrate when they're going to school. And this happens with every single kid. It doesn't matter if we're talking about kids who are going to early childhood education or if they're going to college. If somebody's going to bed hungry, then they are not concentrated and they are not retaining and learning the things as they should. Uh, so that is one of our biggest priorities. Like it all has to do, it's like I mentioned, it's a domino effect. And this domino effect composes of housing, living wages, healthcare, education. So these are the different things that we're trying to work with. And this is why we partner up with organizations like Azeka or our affiliate network, and we try to find solutions to these problems. And I think with Abriendo Puertas and opening doors, it's also understanding what the situation of Arizona families are. So then also those decision makers, legislators, city mayors, county supervisors, the governor understand the problematic that we have so they can take action and start finding solutions to them. That's our role, is giving the information to those that needed so they can make the best decisions. So families in Arizona end up with housing, workforce, education, and health. If we cover those four things that are a priority for people in Arizona, then we're going to be a better state.
Thank you, Enrique. I want to pass it over to Javier and see if we're able to hear him now.
Yeah, I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank
All
you.
right, all right. My apologies. Technical glitch on my end. Well, thank you and thank you, Enrique, for giving that overview. Look, this is something that has been happening now for 4 years. Abriendo Puertas, along with Unidos US, and our polling firm BSP Research has conducted a national survey of roughly 1,400 Latino families and caregivers with young children. This is a national poll. It is a scientific poll. It is also, from what I understand, one of a kind in terms of the issues that it polls and the community that it polls. Uh, as I said, this is the fourth iteration of the report. And this one was conducted at the end of January, early February. So this is right about the time the new federal administration was taking over. And so a lot of the data is very telling. Now, one of the things that we decided to do as a collaborative effort was to oversample in the poll 5 different communities, specifically the community of LA County, the community of Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Florida, primarily because of the large Latino populations that live in those places, but also in an effort to really target the data and target the advocacy work and to be able to complement a lot of the good advocacy work that's happening in those communities. So just to give you a quick overview of the national poll before I get into the state top lines, some of the things that we heard from Latino families, by far, over 2/3 of those polled at the time of the poll wanted Congress and the president to focus on improving wages and income for them and their families, as well as to address the rising costs of living. Again, this is back at the end of January, early February. These were the things that Latino families were asking that the Congress and the federal administration do. Now, for the first time in this survey, and again, this is the fourth iteration, those who responded to the survey also chose 2 immigration-related policies as among the most important for them to have the Congress and the president address. And that is both protecting the rights of immigrants and also providing a pathway to citizenship. Clearly, since the administration took office, a lot has happened with regard to immigration and in some of our communities, very scary stuff. And so I can only assume that those numbers probably have skyrocketed at this point. Now, let me focus a little bit on Arizona because that's what we're here to do. Arizona, as many of you know, is home to a very large and growing Latino community. Roughly 2.3 million Latinos live in Arizona, making it the 4th largest Latino population in the entire country. Roughly 20% of Latinos in Arizona are under the age of 10, which makes this data particularly relevant for both policymakers and community leaders who are working to change some of the outcomes in Arizona. Let me touch on a few of the points here in these top lines. When it comes to economic opportunity, the cost of living in Arizona is higher than the national average, and the average salary in Arizona is lower. When asked to choose the most important issues facing the Latino community, Latino families in Arizona prioritized issues related to economic growth and security, with roughly 32% of those interviewed asking for better wages and income, 31% asking the Congress and the president to address the affordability crisis in housing, and 30% asking the Congress and the President of the United States to deal with the rising costs of living and inflation. Moving on to housing specifically, As you know, housing is a problem for families across the country, but they're especially pronounced among Arizona respondents. In Arizona, non-white Latino households have lower rates of home ownership and higher rates of what we would consider extremely low-income rental housing than their white counterparts. Roughly 86% of Latino families surveyed in Arizona say that it is very important that the president and Congress work to lower the cost of housing during the first year of the presidency. Again, we're roughly halfway through that first year of the presidency, and unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of movement with regard to housing costs nationally. When it comes to immigration, roughly 80% of respondents in Arizona expressed opposition to mass deportation policies, and nearly half, about 48%, said that the state should cooperate with the president's deportation policies, but only when they involve deporting immigrants convicted of crimes. That was also very telling data for us in terms of the immigration debate. Again, this is back in late January, early February. And I do wonder out loud how these numbers may have shifted. When it comes to jobs, job creation is at the forefront of Arizona families' minds. 94% of surveyed families said it was important for the administration to create jobs that pay a living wage with benefits, with 85% of those ranking this issue as very important. 63% reported that at least one member of their household has looked for better paying job or promotion due to the rising cost of living, and nearly half report holding more than one job. That's the most of any of the oversampled communities in this poll. When it comes to childcare, 93% of those surveyed report that high quality learning is very important to them. 92% rated affordability as a very important consideration when looking for childcare opportunities for their children. And 84% say that fair pay and good working conditions for the early educators is something that they look for when they are looking for a place to place their child. I'm going to stop there in the interest of time, but we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Also, we are going to put links to these two reports, both to the national report as well as to the Arizona top line in the chat, so that those who are here with us today can look at this, peruse at their own leisure. And our hope is that you can use this in all of the good work that you do and that you can disseminate this data. Dan, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Javier, for grounding us in the data. I want to pass it on to Kelly to share what you're seeing on the ground and how advocacy efforts are supporting families and educators.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see so many people interested in this subject. My name is Kelly Murphy. I am I have several hats I wear right now, one of which is as the Director of Advocacy and Early Childhood Policy at Child and Family Resources, but a part of that role requires me and is my job to manage the Arizona Early Childhood Alliance, which is a organizational alliance of members. They're organizations who have an interest in early childhood and good early childhood policy, and making sure that our youngest children are able to succeed and they get the right start in life. We have a little over 50 members. So those are organizations from around the state in Arizona who are interested in working with the state legislature and sometimes Congress, and occasionally even at the local level on early childhood issues and making sure that we are putting the things in place that families need to help them succeed. The survey that we just talked about is great because it really aligns with some work that Azeka did last fall as well. We surveyed parents in Arizona as well. A little over 750 parents answered our survey, both in English and in Spanish, and about 35% of our respondents were Hispanic Latino, identified themselves in that way. And so we were really able to talk to parents a little bit. We then culled that down into 3 or 4 focus groups where folks came together and told us what they were seeing in their communities and on the ground level. And that's helped us to develop an advocacy agenda in Arizona that that helps to serve and parents and children, the youngest children. In particular, our survey was surveying parents of infants and toddlers, so birth through age 3. And just a couple of things about our survey that dovetailed into this one really nicely. In many ways, we surveyed across income levels. We weren't asking for any particular income level of parents to reply, but of interesting notes, almost 20% of our respondents were dads who responded to the survey, which is unusual. That's unusually high, and we were very pleased to see that because that's a population that we often don't hear from for many reasons. But 45% of our respondents were families who were on access. And another almost 25% were families who used Kids Care, which is our state's CHIP program. But some key points we called out of that was we asked questions about, do you have access to these services? And if you don't, why not? What's the barrier there for you? But a few things that we learned was that almost 25% of our respondents told us that they remained unemployed when they wanted to work because they could not afford childcare, or had no place to put their children if they went to work. 25% of our respondents, a quarter of them, said that they delayed or were unable to get health care in the recent past because it was too expensive and they could not afford it. And almost 10% of the respondents to our survey had experienced homelessness in the recent past, which is a huge number when you think about that we're talking about parents of very young children. And so likely that also meant that their young children were experiencing homelessness. And of interest, we did the survey in both English and in Spanish, and 55% of our Spanish language respondents said that economic security was the most important issue to their family. And so these two surveys dovetail nicely into each other, what we're seeing at the national level and at the local level. The thing that's happening at the local level here at the state is that it's an uphill climb to get help in our state legislature. We've implemented in Arizona a flat income tax a couple of years back, which has significantly reduced the revenue that the state brings in to pay for services that help families and children. And raising revenue or taxing anything requires a supermajority in our legislature, which is very difficult. I'm sure you all know how partisan politics has become. Getting 65, 75% of people to agree on anything, anywhere, not even in a legislature, is almost impossible. So you can imagine trying to get that done in the state legislature. And even ballot initiatives here now require a 60% threshold of voters. So it's very difficult to raise revenue. So money is very tight. That said, in Arizona, AZECA's policy agenda is almost set for 2026. We will be obviously working on federal issues as well, but at the state level, some of our policy agenda items include child care assistance funding. So for families that need child care assistance, we were lucky, very lucky last year in the state budget to get $45 million of general fund money for child care. Now we have to defend that funding. We needed more like 120 million. We got 45. We have to defend the 45 and ask for more this year. And then there's some tinkering around the state statute around childcare that we'd like to do to help that money flow a little bit easier. One of the things that we'll be putting a lot of energy into this year is First Things First funding. If you're not familiar, First Things First is the state's early childhood agency. It's funded through a tobacco tax. That revenue source is declining over time as fewer and fewer people smoke. Vaping was not a thing at the time when that was created, and so we don't do any taxing of vape products here. And so there's a movement, a push to see if we can include vaping tax into that so that we can continue to fund the programs and services that we have. Another thing that we're working on is paid family medical leave for all folks who work in Arizona. Our state employees have access to that. And if your employer has it, that's great, but most people don't have access to that. And so we're working on that. We are looking to replace some lost funding to home visitation programs for infants and toddlers, young children. The state cut some funding out of that. That is the child abuse prevention program. And we know that if we can prevent those things on the front end, it's less expensive and smarter and creates less damage in the long term rather than waiting until there's a problem and dealing with it after the fact. And then the last two things that we're really working on is figuring out ways to raise new state revenue. So as I mentioned, it's very difficult. So we're getting ready to embark on a project. Hopefully we've applied for a grant to help us, but if we don't get it, we're going to move forward either way, looking at what are different funding sources that we might be able to use to help fund some of the things that children and families in Arizona need. And then lastly, we will be, because of what's happening at the federal level and at the state level, really working to protect our current programs and services that serve families. We're already seeing some in the very near future cuts to things like the SNAP program and cuts to certain housing programs and other federal programs that are being cut. And so we are really going to be working with our state legislature to try and make sure that at the state level, we are not making the problem worse by cutting things out of those. And so that's the things that we'll be focusing on for this coming legislative session. And I'll stop right there. I know we have some time for questions and answers. So.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, for that insight of what's happening on the ground and locally in Arizona. Before we move into Q&A, we'd like to take a look at a short video from Unidos US and ASECA that captures the challenges and hopes of Arizona's early childhood educators.
The goal is to get all children to kindergarten ready to succeed and make sure that all families have access to what they need for the youngest children in the state. The cost of childcare in particular has gone up exponentially.
What we're doing as child care providers, we basically shape the future. Because some people will say that, oh, we're just here to watch kids all day and not do anything, but we're here to actually teach these teachers to become really good teachers and help these children from 0 to 5 and kind of help them flourish as they enter elementary.
Yeah, I'll read it.
I am a single parent to 3 young children, and I am part of the DES subsidy. Without that subsidy, I wouldn't be able to provide for my children. I just didn't have that support to help me out with my children. So I came in and I applied for the job, and I've been here since. And with that, I'm able to bring my children to work. I take them home with me when I leave, because you figure even if I was to make minimum wage, that would take sometimes half your paycheck, depending on how many kids you have. Sometimes it takes almost all your paycheck if you have a lot of kids. For me, if I wasn't getting the subsidy and it was just, I had to pay for out of my pocket and it was 50% off, I would have to look at it, okay, is this benefiting me? How can I make changes? Do I need to work a second job? What do I have to do to be able to bring income in? And for some parents, it's probably cheaper just to stay home.
Para mí es una experiencia muy bonita porque trabajar con los niños, yo pienso que no existe un trabajo más satisfactorio porque todos los días tienes que darles cariño, darles amor. Y los niños es el futuro. A nosotros nos están educando para que los niños vayan preparados para cuando ellos vayan a la escuela, que ya sepa el abecedario, sepa los colores, sepa los números. Y es muy importante la educación temprana.
There's no way that I could afford childcare and be able to work full-time and go back to school. And it really was not an option for my partner to step out of the workforce. We can't afford more house. We can't, move up in our careers. We can't afford to be living outside of these means. So this is where we're at for the time being. We're also sort of outside of that threshold for qualifying for scholarships, so we wouldn't. And so it's just like, there's no options for us.
What do you see on this page? What you see. Funding for childcare is a big social issue. The state of Arizona for years, have never put money in the general fund for childcare assistance. If someone brought their child to me and their child's 4 years old and it's $280 a week for childcare, they can't afford that if they're taking a job that pays $19 an hour. how do you pay over, $1,000 a month for childcare when you have rent and you have your cars, and you try to live your life and care for your children. So childcare is a really a huge social issue because businesses can't employ people if they don't have a safe place to leave their child. The whole early education industry is not just babysitters. We're here to educate children. Birth to 5 is the crucial years of their life where their brain is developing.
Quality, affordable, accessible childcare is something that all families deserve and that everybody can benefit from, every organization and employer. And my hope is that we begin to recognize that this is a nonpartisan issue. This is not one side or the other. This is not, it's everybody's issue. It really is.
I'm proud of the work that I've done here. I've had children that are difficult and people look at me and go, oh, I don't want to deal with that kid. And I've molded and helped grow them. I went from watching a child that would harm themselves to not harming themselves, and they've got the help and support that they needed from the school district and the parent. And it's rewarding to know that without my help, I don't know where they would have been right now.
So Arizona needs to invest in families in order for them to grow economically, socially, and close that educational gap that we have. We're not setting up families for success, and our families deserve better.
Thank you so much to Josefina, who's offering tech support during this webinar. I want to give everyone who's joining us on the webinar to ask any questions that may have come up as our panelists have shared more about their work or about anything that they saw during the video. I don't see any questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. So to give you all time to ask any questions that you might want to ask our panelists, I'll go ahead and start us off with some questions. The first question that I have is for Javier, and it relates to early childhood. So, living and working in New Mexico, this state has emerged as kind of a North Star in all things early childhood. So, can you walk us through that process? What can other states learn from New Mexico when it comes to early childhood?
Thank you for the question, Diana. And I'm actually at the Learn conference in Baltimore, which is about to start here in a couple hours, and I'll be presenting about some of this. New Mexico is a place obviously that I call home, and that I'm very proud of the work that's been done over the last, gosh, I want to say 15, 16 years. This has been a labor of love coming out of community, coming out of the hopes and the dreams of families. And I was watching this video. I've got to admit, I got a little teary-eyed because those moms, those kids, those dads, and the advocates like you all, like Kelly and Enrique and your teams, that is where the magic happens. And we were there just 10, 12, 15 years ago, doing what we called house meetings and door knocking and meetings in the basements of churches, and with Abriendo Puertas as a hook, as a training manual, if you would, to bring moms and dads and grandparents together and dream of what an early childhood system should look like. And, as recently as about 3 weeks ago, our governor announced universal child care for everybody, regardless of income, regardless of immigration status. And this is work that's been building over those last 15 years. And so, to answer your question, right, how did New Mexico become that North Star? Well, it's because families have been at the table from the very beginning. Moms and dads and their children have been advocating for this work, for these resources for those last 15 years. I can tell you there are people, there are leaders who started organizing with us 15 years ago, and their kids were 7, 8 years old. Now those kids are in college. Some of them have businesses. Some of them have gone on to the Ivy Leagues and then come back to do the work. So it's doable, it's possible, And as long as you center the families, you can really move the needle and really force politicians, right, to see the light and make the investment where it matters. You know, one of my favorite lines from back in the day was by one of our community partners, Mr. Alan Sanchez, who runs the state's largest home visitation program in New Mexico. No state money; they pay for it on their own. They've got their own trust fund. But he would always say, the more you invest in the playpen, the less you have to spend in the state pen.
Wow, thank you for that insight, Javier. It looks like we have a question in the Q&A section from Tatiana Sanchez, and her question is that I'll offer to anyone on the panel. What advice do you have for those of us who have local representatives that do not support social services for families? My emails are always met with responses about how they believe families need to bootstrap it.
I'll start, but I know Kelly will probably follow. Uh, I think one of the important things when we're talking with state representatives, members of Congress, like any elected official, is we have to make it tangible. And what I mean by this is they have to relate in some way. You have to give them a story. You have to tell them like something that is happening either in their district, their legislative district. They have to relate what you're talking about to somebody who they are representing, whether it's from their party, whether it's from the opposition, or whether it's somebody who's independent, right? Once they start realizing that this is having an effect on a person, like data is very important, numbers are very important, but making it into how we say it in carne y hueso, that they can relate to that, then it's when they start thinking about it, right? So it's not the same of saying 88% of people in Arizona want their kids to be bilingual. They want them to know Spanish, English, or even knowing a different language. It's telling them this person who lives in your district, this person has kids. They want to learn Spanish, English, Chinese. Why? Because they want to thrive because of X, Y, and Z. You have to start making it into somebody that they can relate to. And that would be my advice, right? And the second one would be going with organizations who are also doing the work and not going alone. And I'll pass it to Kelly because this is a lot of the work that she does.
Yeah, I completely agree that that storytelling is really important. I mean, I'm there a lot. I talk to legislators a lot. They get tired of hearing from me, frankly. You know, I'd much rather take a parent, a family, a provider, someone who's from that district to tell their story. And I think you know, making it clear that they answer to the voters in that district, that's who put them there to do what the voters of that district wanted them to do. And you know, I think you keep trying, even when I've heard the bootstraps argument, I've heard a lot of other arguments from a lot of people, but the truth is early childhood issues, these kinds of issues, they're not partisan. It's not a partisan issue. This is something that's supported universally, by both of our parties. And so, you know, I think you have to keep going back. I think showing up in numbers makes a difference. If there are those on this call who have an interest in early childhood in particular issues, we do a day at the legislature every year. You saw from that video, a lot of that was shot at our last day at the legislature, but we showed up with 400 plus people at the Capitol. That does get people's attention. And we will go with you on a visit to go actually meet face to face with your legislator, because that's the other thing I would say is it's very easy when you send a letter, and that's an easy thing to do, is send a letter or an email to the person who represents you. It's a lot harder for them to say that to you to your face. So if you want to meet with the legislator, we'll go with you. I'll go with you. I'll just sit there quietly while you talk if that's what you want to do. But I think it's much more difficult when you're in person and you're saying to people, you know, people in your district are struggling. This is something we are all dealing with in this district. And it's not just the low income families in the district that are struggling with it. The lack of childcare, the low pay for childcare workers right now means that that impacts anyone who's looking for a place to put their children into care. It's why New Mexico moved to free care for all. They're trying to set up a system that doesn't only benefit one group of people, the wealthy. It's a system that's intended to benefit everyone. And so even families who are private paying for childcare at very fancy childcare centers can't get their children in if there's no workers there to actually care for the children. And so, sometimes you have to be repetitive, and sometimes you have to be in their office. All of those things I think work. But the more people you show up with, the better, in my opinion. So people are welcome to join us on Early Childhood Day. I'm hoping it's going to be in February this year. And we'll put out the information on it for anybody who's interested in participating in that. If you want to speak to a legislator, we have people who are experienced doing that. We'll go with you on that day on visits to see legislators. So, that's what Azeka is around for. We are there to try to help people have their voice heard.
Thank you, Kelly and Enrique, for the strategy and offering your solidarity as well. We have another question in the Q&A section. Just want to remind you all, you're welcome to throw any question in here that will get to the panelists. And so this question comes from Audrin Morris Sandoval. And the question is, since Arizona is a school choice state, which the current administration appears to support, could that possibly be a strategy to expand that to 0 to 5 or possibly at least preschool?
I'm happy to take that question. So we have parent choice is important in Arizona. I'll say that, and it's important politically. It's important to families. We have a system that is mixed delivery in Arizona for early childhood, for childcare and for preschool. And so by that I mean we have private providers, we have faith-based providers, we have school-based providers, and families can choose from any of those already. And so that's a thing that's there. I think the question might be alluding to ESAs in Arizona, which is the scholarshiping. It's a sort of a bit of a political hot button issue in Arizona right now because there's a lack of oversight over that program. Yes, theoretically, those things could be expanded. We could expand any manner of things that we do for the K-12 system into early childhood to help families have access to those. Do I think we could expand ESAs right now? Given the political environment, I think it would be a very difficult sell, and unless we can get some oversight into that program. I don't see a mass expansion being super popular right now.
And all that to add, I think the issue there are the guardrails of how the vouchers are used in Arizona, right? If there were enough guardrails that actually made sure that the money was not being spent on Legos or a day trip to Disney and things like that, and then an increase of the use of them, then it could be something, right? But right now it's overused. People are taking advantage of it when they don't really need it. And that's, I think, the big problem that we have with the voucher system right now. And there isn't any oversight in reality. So if we wanted to expand it, we would first need to take care of the current situation, make sure that there's oversight, that there are guardrails, and that it's used properly. So then you can expand it. But right now, I don't think it would be something that we would be in support of with the current situation.
Thank you both. There's another question in the Q&A section from an anonymous attendee. And it says, I was recently in a community meeting and there was a comment that quote, people did not want to work, that there are jobs available, but people don't want to give up their benefits. How do you address this mentality in local leaders with the lack of understanding of obstacles and need for wraparound services supporting community that doesn't always know how to comfortably express their needs and or concerns, excuse me?
You know, I can maybe give a general response to that, and I don't know if my Arizona counterparts want to drill into any details. But that's sort of a catch-all sort of defense mechanism against building out strong supports and safety nets for families. You know, the truth of the matter is that the Medicaid system as it exists, the SNAP food support system as it exists, housing vouchers for people who need them as they exist, none of those systems are actually good systems. None of them actually work efficiently for the consumer, for the person who needs it. And so the notion that, you know, there's sort of widespread fraud or that people just don't want to work to keep benefits just doesn't compute. In fact, if you look at the data nationally, when it comes to rates of fraud, waste, and abuse, you're going to see that mostly on the companies that are contracted to perform the work. So if you look at Medicaid, go look at the contracts between insurance companies and the government to provide Medicaid. Go look at in many cases, healthcare providers. Senator Rick Scott in Florida. Before he was a senator, he was a governor. Before that, he ran a large healthcare insurance company. And guess what? They got busted for fraud, right? So it's just not a true statement. Is there fraud? Are there people who maybe, you know, finagle here and there to keep a benefit? Probably yes. But to the extent that it's causing a system to crater, that's just not the case. Now, the last thing I'll say on that, because we heard this in New Mexico as well, when it comes to childcare, it really shouldn't be an issue of qualifying or not. I mean, if you're a parent and you're actively seeking out childcare for your child, that's welcome. Like, that's great. The fact that you are taking initiative to have your child in a safe, nurturing, educational space versus leaving your kid alone or with people who may not be good for them is a good thing, right? And so it doesn't the argument doesn't really match up to reality.
Yeah, I think the thing I'd say is I find me somebody who's living off of TANF, who's living high on the hog. Like, people don't get rich utilizing benefits. That it's not a thing. What the thing that I do when I'm having that conversation with people, because it does come up, you know, what about the fraud? What about the waste? What about the abuse? Whatever. Um, I think is just try to turn the conversation around to say kind of what you just did, which is as it pertains to childcare benefits, what we see more often is not people not wanting to work so they can have benefits, but they have to self-limit um, advancing in the workplace so that they can continue to afford to live day to day. And by that, I mean, if you go past what our eligibility for childcare assistance is, if you make more, you get a 50 cent per hour raise. Now you are no longer eligible for childcare. And so oftentimes people forego advancing in their career in small increments because they're going to lose resources they have to have in order to be able to continue to work. So that same thing happens with other benefits that you may be receiving. If you're income eligible for it, the more you earn, eventually you're going to be pushed off of those programs. And so, you know, people want to work or they wouldn't be working. They wouldn't be seeking out childcare, first of all, but also we have a system set up to make it very difficult for people to advance in a career and become self-sufficient because we cut them off of everything as soon as they hit that whatever that magic number is for that particular program. And so I do realize that a lot of people say, I mean, I hear it a lot myself from people, but the reality is that the individual is not usually committing the fraud. They want to continue to work. They want to be able to take care of their own families. That's more often the case than not.
And I would add to that that the majority of the people who are trying to have these benefits are working people, right? They want their family to get ahead. They want their family to thrive. They want their family to get educated. The problem is that there is those cases, one, two, three cases within those programs that are not legit, right? And we tend to talk about it and then generalize like if everybody is in the same bucket, when that's not the reality, right? The reality is that the majority of the people are trying to do things the correct way. They want their families to be successful, but they need that help. They need that push, right? And sometimes when they are getting there, if they make, like Kelly said, probably 5 cents more, they lose everything else, right? And losing everything else is probably losing $1,000 for just making $20 more, right? So that's the problem, the way the system is made up. So I think the other part is, how do we improve systems that we have on all these different programs? That's the next step. It's not getting rid of them. It's how do we improve them? How do we make things better so people can be successful and families can be successful? If we think of first, second, or third generation parents, when they come, if they were farm workers, like in Yuma, Arizona, and they're working in the farm, they want their kids to go to college and be successful. And they have done it. That's what every family is thriving for, having a successful family and being your kids better than you are.
Thank you, Enrique. I have a question for you, Enrique. Considering that Arizona families have identified affordable housing as one of their top 3 issues, and you've talked quite a bit about partnerships, how can partnerships between the government, philanthropy, and community-based organizations reduce these economic pressures that families are facing?
So there's several things that we have to look at, right? And it's a combination of giving elected officials also information so they can make the best choices of how those impacts are going to happen, right? So I'll give you the case study of what we're doing in Nogales, Arizona. So Nogales, Arizona, we identified that they need at least 1,000 new affordable homes within the next 4 years. One of the things that was holding the construction of new affordable homes is the way zoning codes were in place in Nogales, right? So talking with mayor, the city council, we started looking at all this, but also with coalition partners that are experts in the field. So they gave recommendations, right? So these recommendations actually turned out to changing zoning codes in Nogales. Not perfect, but a lot of good changes happened due to the mayor and the city council. With this, new projects are being looked at now in Nogales, and new homes are going to be built. But then we have to start looking, okay, how do we get people into these homes, right? So then we have like CPLC, which is one of our affiliates, and they have a mortgage company. So they're going to be working with those that are interested in buying the homes. It doesn't mean that people have to get the mortgage with them, but they're helping them. We have a program, HFE, Home and Financial Empowerment. So that basically is like housing counseling if you want to buy a house. So we're working with CPLC through our program and getting people ready to buy their home, right? So it's a combination of so many factors in order to make sure that they get to that point where they can buy a home, but also talking with the landowners and developers so they don't increase prices just because they can make a profit, right? They have to be conscious enough that, okay, you know what? I'll make my profit more on volume than just making profit on 1 or 2 homes, right? So it's a combination also of where do you want to go, how you want to do it, and if there's anything in mind or a specific community that you're thinking of, let us know because we're already talking with the mayor of Tucson, Regina Romero, to see if we can implement programs like that in Tucson. We're also talking to city council members here in Phoenix, like Ana Hernandez, right? So there's different things that we're doing as an organization to push this, because that is basically the basic part of every family, where they're going to live, whether they're renting or buying. But if there are more affordable homes, people are buying homes, also that's going to help the market, and rent is going to go down for certain people, new starter homes. So it's all like, how do you do things that end up benefiting the entire community? So I hope I answered your question with that explanation.
Yes, thank you. We are reaching the end of the webinar, and so if there are no more questions in the Q&A section, I'd like for us to close with a question for all panelists, starting with Kelly. What gives you hope about the future of Latino families in Arizona, and what's one priority you'd like everyone here to take action on?
Yeah, hope is tough in this environment right now, but there is hope out there. I think there's a lot of energy around trying to do better and to do right um, for our community. And so it gives me hope to see, especially young people with a lot of energy, come in with new ideas and and the desire to make things better for all of us. And so that's what gives me hope. I think the thing I'd like to see is for people to get engaged, and that's the main thing to me. Is like it doesn't matter how you get engaged, but get engaged, register to vote, and vote every time. Vote in primaries, vote in local elections, vote in national elections, vote. I know a lot of people think their vote doesn't matter, but it does. We've seen even in Arizona, we've had state legislative races decided by a handful of votes. We had a congressional, actually our last attorney general's race was decided by a couple hundred votes in the state. So, you know, that matters. I'd like to see people get engaged there by finding out who their legislators are, by posting on social media to get other people engaged. There's just get engaged in some way. Find somebody to get engaged with if you need a buddy or a pal, and just get out there and start making noise. That's what I'd like to see.
Thank you. Javier or Enrique, do you have anything to add?
I'll go. I think for me in Arizona, something that I'm hopeful is that we end up changing Arizona from an English only state. We're the only state in the entire country that has English only, and that's because of Prop 203. So I hope we repeal that in the near future. Uh, and from being English only, that we go to multi-language, right? Not just dual language, but multi-language, that kids in our schools learn more than two languages, that they are fluent, and that in the future they are competitive enough because they know more than two languages. That's something that I'm hopeful for, and that's something Unidos US is pushing for.
And I think what I can add to that is the importance of the work happening in Arizona, and the importance of the work that Kelly and Enrique and their teams are doing on the ground on behalf of so many people and in collaboration with so many others. Hope is the last thing we can lose, especially right now, as hard as it is. And the way we move forward is both with a commitment and a passion for doing right by our kids and our families, and also by backing it up with hard, cold data, because numbers don't lie. And we have the numbers. We've shared the numbers with you. We hope that you can make use of these top lines of these surveys. They're all online for you to download and use. You don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to pay any one of us. Please use them as you see fit. Help inform your policymakers, help organize your communities. And we're just getting started. There's a lot of good work happening in Arizona and elsewhere, and I'm grateful to be a part of this partnership with these incredible people. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. And thank you to everyone who has joined us from wherever you're joining us. And thank you for your questions in the Q&A section, for the discussions in the chat. Thank you to our panelists, Enrique, Kelly, and Javier, for sharing your insights and leadership. And thank you to Unidos US and ASECA for your continued partnership. Arizona's families are showing us what resilience looks like, and our collective work ensures their voices have a brighter and more equitable future. So we invite you all to read the full 2025 National Latino Family Report and to stay connected with Abriendo Puertas and Unidos US for future dialogues. Thank you so much, everyone.